Now, the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund has welcomed government's classification of foodborne illnesses as a national disaster. At least 20 child deaths have been recorded in parts of the country in the past few months. The organisation is now also calling for collaborative efforts to ensure food safety in our communities. Let's speak to the CEO of the organisation, Dr Linda Ncube-Nkomo. It's great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for coming on to the programme, Linda. It's such a devastating story, especially, one thinks how many more children is it going to take before urgent action is taken. Just yesterday we heard that the Disaster Management Centre has classified this as a national disaster. And then in the same week that classification happens, another 5-year-old boy is killed as a result of suspected contaminated food.
Charles, good morning, and really our deepest condolences to the families of the children that have died from something that has been so preventable. And I think, when we declare a national disaster, there should be action that's showing that we are dealing with a disaster. We should already have stopped when we were burying 6 children in Naledi at the start of the month. That's when that declaration should have happened, because 6 children dying should be something that has us flying our flags at half-mast. So declarations are one thing, they're important, but what's urgent is the action. That end-to-end value chain audit that says, where is the source of this coming from? We can't go on like this. We've got to declare a never again campaign and be really intentional about the actions that say never again on our watch should a child die from something preventable. It's really something painful that we have to be talking about. And it's a form of violence against children that as a country we say, okay, state of disaster. Where's the action to show the seriousness with which we're taking this thing? That's where our frustration as the children's sector is right now. Where is that urgent action?
Yeah, absolutely. One sort of asks the question, how many children should die before we see that urgent action?
Absolutely. And at this point in time, the same uproar that there is about illegal minors in a shaft is the same uproar that I'm looking for child rights lawyers to say, no, it's not enough that we're going to give another 20 days for spaza shops to register. It's important that they register. Now we should be declaring war and saying, shut down every single shop and let's audit the end-to-end system and not be driven by this is the event, this is going to be the action to address the event, but just looking at the entire system. Where is it gone wrong so that we don't have to have another conversation a few weeks down the line because more children are dying and we're almost like paralyzed.
And the irony, Linda, is we're in the week where we were just marking on Wednesday Universal Children's Day. In a country like ours, where women and children are already under threat from issues around gender-based violence, we certainly don't need yet another threat to our children.
The further irony is that on Monday, we're going to be starting 16 days of activism of no violence against women and children. And this, like I'm saying, is a form of violence against children. That children can die and it becomes headlines, but there isn't something that's saying this is urgent. We should be wailing that 20 children have died and they didn't need to die. And maybe it needs the child of somebody really important to die. But I think as a country, we should be coming together, putting our economic muscle as individuals behind the families of these children so that the seriousness and the gravity of their deaths becomes something that's totally continually on the agenda so that we can get to a point where children are not dying, are not buying contaminated food, and we say, oh man, shame.
Yeah.
It's sad.
Yeah.
When we're saying we're preventing it now.
Your Chief Programs Officer at the Nelson Mandela Foundation is also quoted in your statement, Carl Miller. He says, children will always be children. They will visit spaza shops. They will have their favorite snacks. But it's our responsibility to protect them by ensuring that everything they consume meets the highest safety standards. And we see the ball rolling now insofar as there was a bust in Benoni, I believe it was, this week, where there was a factory found with a whole lot of expired food set to be sold to spaza shops. Hopefully I'm getting the facts of that story right. But these kinds of busts and these kinds of investigations and raids on spaza shops, the conversation that we're having about pesticides now, and the fact that the pesticide that is being used by these spaza shops is actually not licensed in South Africa. Turbofos, I believe it's called. It's not licensed for domestic use. There's only 4 licenses in South Africa, and it's all for agricultural use. But now we're finding it in our communities and sometimes in our homes. So we're picking up the pace, but this is months too late.
Too little, too late, Michelle, because somebody knows who is supplying that. And it's someone within the community that is known who's supplying that. What's the consequences now? Because that's what we want to now start seeing. As long as we're having a conversation that says, oh, there was a bust in this place, and then it dies, we're not going to get to killing the root of lawlessness. And this is an issue of lawlessness. It really is, that we have allowed spaza shops to become business as usual. And it's only when children are dying that we're saying, oh my goodness, they should actually be regulated. When the first unregulated shop opened, what did we do about it? And this should be really a lesson of mammoth proportions to us, that when lawlessness starts, it's a little trickle that becomes a wave and a colossal tide. And we need to see the consequences now. We just cannot sit back and be talking and talking and talking without saying the whole system. We need to look at the entire end-to-end system, and we will ultimately then get to the source.
And I would argue, Linda, that it's not just about spaza shops when we talk about foodborne illnesses. There's also the massive issue around proper access to clean water and sanitation. And that's a long-standing issue.
And then that's why I'm talking about systems, that we need to be looking at the systems that will have an impact in this issue on the quality of food that is sold to communities. And like you said earlier on, what my colleague Carl said, children, when they're going to a spaza shop or any other informal place where they can get food, they're not thinking, is the food safe? It becomes a regulatory issue, a municipality issue, a state issue, to make sure that the regulations and the standards that are required for food to be sold to consumers are safe. We can't put that responsibility on children. But at this point, we're getting to a point where we have to be forced to put that responsibility on children and create the awareness to them and take away their innocence, create the awareness that says, if you buy food, you potentially could be buying your death, so don't do it. And then what does it say about the additional layer of trauma that we introduce to children's lives by the state not doing what's required in the form of municipalities, making sure that regulations that are in place are actually adhered to?
Yeah, taking away their innocence or the risk of them losing their lives. I suppose we will all choose the former. Dr. Linda Ncube-Nkomo, let me thank you for your time this afternoon. It's such an important discussion as the number of children losing their lives to the scourge of contaminated food continues to rise in our country. Dr. Ncube-Nkomo is the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund.